My name is Alina, and I am 29 years old. The phone rang while I was standing in my kitchen, staring at a half-packed suitcase and pretending I was excited for the holidays. It was 3 days before Thanksgiving. I remember the exact smell in the room, cinnamon from the candle I'd lit, trying to force myself into a festive mood. My flight confirmation was open on my laptop. Non-refundable. Already paid for. I'd done everything right this year. Bought gifts early. Took time off work. Even practiced smiling in the mirror so I wouldn't seem difficult. Then my phone lit up. Mom. I smiled automatically. That reflex was trained into me long before adulthood. Hey, Mom, I said. I was just about to. Tori, she cut in. Her voice wasn't angry. That would have been easier. It was flat. Careful. Like someone stepping around broken glass. I need to tell you something. My stomach dropped. What's wrong? I asked. Is Dad okay? He's fine. A pause. Then listen, don't come home this year. I actually laughed. A short, confused sound. What? Victoria doesn't want any stress, she said. She's pregnant again. We're trying to keep things calm. I gripped the phone tighter. Stress? I haven't even spoken to her in months. Exactly, Mom replied. And let's keep it that way. There it was. The familiar tightening in my chest. The silent accusation I'd lived with my entire life. Mom, I said carefully, I just asked her last year why I wasn't invited to the baby shower. And that, she snapped, is what I mean. You always make things about yourself. I stared out the window as snow drifted down onto the empty street. 27 years old, and I was being uninvited from my own family's Thanksgiving for asking a question. I already bought my ticket, I said quietly. Then get a refund, she replied. Victoria needs peace. You understand. The line went dead. No apology. No explanation. Just a door closing again. I stood there long after the call ended, phone still pressed to my ear like it might ring back and fix itself. It didn't. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at the ticket confirmation glowing on my laptop screen. Home, Boston to Connecticut. Departure in 72 hours. Felt like proof of how stupid I'd been for believing this year would be different. And the worst part? This wasn't new. This was just the moment I finally stopped lying to myself about it. There was my 16th birthday, canceled because my sister had a bad day. My college graduation, empty seats because her appointment couldn't be moved. Every holiday where I learned that love in my family was conditional, and I was always the condition. I called my dad. The phone rang too many times before he answered. Hey, kiddo, he said, already exhausted. Did Mom tell you? I asked. A long pause. Football murmured in the background. She mentioned it. And you're okay with this? Another pause. Longer. You know how your mother is, he said. She's just trying to keep the peace. By excluding me. Do you want me there? I asked. Silence. Then, quietly, I think it's better if you listen to your mother this year. Something inside me shut down. Not anger. Not tears. Just emptiness. Okay, I said. I hung up before he could say anything else. That night, as the light faded from my apartment, I made a decision I didn't fully understand yet, but I felt it settled deep in my bones. If I wasn't welcome at their table, I would stop begging for a chair. Quick pause. If this story is already hitting close to home, take a second to hit like so more people who need this can find it. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been made to feel like the problem in your own family? Now let me tell you what Thanksgiving morning looked like when I woke up completely alone. 'Cause that's where everything actually changed. I thought being excluded would be the worst thing that ever happened to me. I had no idea that sitting alone on Thanksgiving would introduce me to the people who would one day replace my family, permanently. Thanksgiving morning arrived quietly. No alarms. No family group chat. No frantic last-minute cooking questions or "what time are you landing" texts. Just silence. I woke up in my studio apartment to the sound of footsteps above me, neighbors arriving, doors opening and closing, children laughing as coats hit the floor. Somewhere in the building, someone was already cooking. The smell of butter and onions drifted through the vents, sharp enough to make my chest ache. I sat up in bed and checked my phone. Nothing. No "Happy Thanksgiving." No follow-up from my parents. No half-hearted text from my sister. It was like I had vanished overnight. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching snow collect on the empty street below. Cars passed occasionally, loaded with people and casseroles and expectations. Everyone was headed somewhere. I wasn't. Around noon, I made the mistake of opening social media. There it was. A photo my sister had posted less than an hour earlier, the entire family gathered around the dining table. My parents. Victoria. Her husband. Their toddler in a tiny turkey sweater. Everyone smiling like this was the most natural thing in the world. The caption read, "So grateful for my family." Feeling blessed. I zoomed in without meaning to. Counted the chairs. 5 seats. 5 people. No empty chair. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd planned for my absence. I closed the app and stared at the ceiling, letting the reality settle in. I could stay home. Order delivery. Spend the day pretending this didn't hurt. That's what I'd always done. But something in me resisted. I wasn't going to disappear quietly today. I wasn't going to turn myself into the sad version of me they'd always accused me of being. If I was going to eat Thanksgiving dinner alone, I'd do it somewhere warm. Somewhere alive. I grabbed my coat and searched for restaurants still open. One name kept coming up, an old place downtown that never closed on holidays. When I stepped inside, warmth hit me immediately. The smell of roasted turkey. Bread. Wine. The low hum of conversation layered with laughter. Families filled the room, grandparents at the head of tables, kids swinging their legs, couples leaning into each other like this was tradition. The hostess looked at me with polite sympathy. "Just one today?" "Just one," I said. She led me to a small table near the back, squeezed between the kitchen door and a large family that had clearly pushed several tables together. 3 generations, maybe more. Plates already being passed. Someone telling a story everyone else already knew. I sat down and opened the menu, pretending this was intentional. My food arrived, golden turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce placed just right. It looked perfect. I couldn't taste it. I kept glancing sideways at the family next to me, not because I wanted to intrude, but because something about them felt effortless. They interrupted each other. They laughed without checking who was watching. They belonged to one another without negotiating it. And suddenly, something hit me harder than the phone call ever had. This wasn't about one holiday. This was about a lifetime of trying to earn what other people received by default. I'd spent years shrinking myself, staying quiet, apologizing for asking questions, pretending I didn't notice when I was left out, all for the chance to sit at a table that never had room for me. If I kept doing that, what would be left of me? Tears blurred my vision before I could stop them. I turned toward the window, pressing my napkin to my face, trying to be invisible like I always was. Then a voice broke through. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" I froze. An older woman stood beside my table, her expression gentle but direct. Kind of face that had listened more than it had spoken in life. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Just allergies." She smiled slightly. "Allergies don't usually show up like that on Thanksgiving." I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "My name's Eleanor," she said. And no one should eat alone today. She glanced back at her family, then back at me. Why don't you come join us? I shook my head immediately. Oh no, I couldn't. I don't want to intrude. You wouldn't be, she replied. I'm inviting you. Her husband leaned back in his chair and called out, Trust me, once she decides something, it's happening. The younger man at the table grinned. We already have too much food anyway. I looked at my untouched plate, the empty chair across from me, at this stranger who was offering me something my own family wouldn't. Okay, I said quietly. I didn't know it yet, but that single word was about to change everything. Quick pause. If you've ever spent a holiday feeling invisible, hit like so this reaches the right people. And tell me in the comments, would you have accepted the invitation or stayed at the empty table? I thought I was just being kind to myself by saying yes. I had no idea that sitting down at that table would start a chain of events that would follow me all the way to my wedding day. They didn't make it awkward. That was the first thing I noticed. No forced small talk. No pity smiles. No, so why are you alone today? Questions that felt like a spotlight. Someone pulled out a chair like it was routine. Someone else slid a plate toward me before I even sat down. A glass of wine appeared at my elbow without discussion. It was unsettling how natural it felt. I'm Richard, the older man said, shaking my hand firmly. This is my wife, Eleanor. She smiled at me like she'd known me longer than 10 minutes. Our son Daniel, his wife Sarah, their kids, Richard continued, pointing around the table, and our youngest, Marcus. Hi, I said, suddenly very aware of my voice. Welcome to the chaos, Marcus said with an easy grin. You came at the loud part. Laughter rippled around the table. Not polite laughter. Real laughter. The kind that didn't check who was watching first. I sat down slowly, half expecting someone to realize this was a mistake. No one did. Conversation resumed around me like I'd always been there. Plates were passed. Stories overlapped. Someone argued about football. Kid corrected an adult without consequences. No one told anyone to calm down. No one was accused of being too much. I felt something unfamiliar loosen in my chest. At one point, Daniel passed me the mashed potatoes and asked casually, So what do you do, Tori? I'm a graphic designer, I said. Freelance, mostly. That's awesome, Sarah replied. I can barely draw a straight line. Her daughter leaned across the table. Mom, that's not true. Your stick people have heads. Table erupted. I laughed before I could stop myself. Surprised me, the sound. Felt unused. Like a muscle I hadn't stretched in years. Richard raised his glass. To unexpected guests who make the table better. Everyone lifted their glasses. Including me. I swallowed past the lump in my throat and took a sip of wine. After dinner plates were cleared and pie appeared. More pie than anyone could reasonably eat. Eleanor slid into the chair beside me. How are you really doing? She asked quietly. I hesitated. The truth felt heavy, and I didn't want to drop it onto strangers. I'm okay, I said. Today's just complicated. She nodded like she already knew. Do you want to tell me why you were sitting alone? I stared at my fork. My mom called a few days ago. Told me not to come home. My sister's pregnant. She didn't want stress. Eleanor didn't react the way people usually did. She didn't excuse it. Didn't minimize it. Didn't ask what I'd done to cause it. She just said, I see. That almost broke me. I've been hearing that word my whole life, I added quietly. Stress. Drama. Difficult. Apparently those words all mean the same thing when it comes to me. Eleanor studied me for a moment. Then she said something that shifted everything. I practiced family law for over 30 years, she said calmly. And I learned something early on. The person accused of causing drama is often the only one telling the truth. My breath caught. Families don't like mirrors, she continued. They prefer scapegoats. No one had ever said that to me before. You're not the problem, she said gently. You never were. My eyes burned. I looked away quickly, embarrassed by how badly I needed to hear that. Hey, she added softly, touching my hand. You're allowed to take up space. That was it. That was the sentence that cracked something open. Quick pause. If you've ever been labeled dramatic just for asking to be treated fairly, hit like so this reaches the people who need it. And tell me in the comments, has anyone ever blamed you for rocking the boat when you were just asking for respect? The rest of the evening unfolded slowly. Kids fell asleep on laps. Coffee replaced wine. Coats were gathered. When the check arrived, I reached for my wallet instinctively. Richard waved me off. Thanksgiving tradition, he said. We always cover dinner for new friends. I can't. You can, Eleanor said. And you will. Before we left, Eleanor pressed a small card into my hand. If you ever need someone to talk to, she said, call me. Then Richard added, Sunday dinners. Every week. Open invitation. I smiled politely, assuming it was kindness, not expectation. But as I stepped back into the cold night, something felt different. I wasn't going home empty. I was going home changed. I thought Thanksgiving had simply ended better than it started. I didn't realize I'd just met the people who would slowly, quietly become my real family, or that one of them would change my future forever. I didn't go to Sunday dinner. Not the first week. Not the second either. I told myself it was because I didn't want to intrude. That I didn't want to mistake kindness for obligation. That I didn't want to embarrass myself by assuming an invitation meant something permanent. Truth was simpler. I was scared. For most of my life, invitations came with conditions. Unspoken rules. Invisible tripwires. You were welcome as long as you didn't ask questions, didn't need too much, didn't take up too much space. So when Eleanor called me the following Thursday just to check in, she said, my instinct was to keep it light. I'm good, I told her. Busy week. I'm glad, she replied. Then, casually, we'll be home Sunday. Dinner's at 6. No pressure. No guilt. No follow-up. After we hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time. Sunday afternoon came faster than I expected. At 5:30, I stood on the sidewalk in front of a house I recognized immediately, a warm Victorian with lights glowing in every window. Laughter drifted through the door. The smell of something baking reached the porch. I stood there for 5 full minutes. My hand hovered near the doorbell, heart pounding like I was about to take an exam I hadn't studied for. What if this was a mistake? What if I stayed too long? What if I said the wrong thing and proved my family right? Before I could change my mind, the door opened. There you are, Eleanor said, smiling like she'd been expecting me all along. She pulled me into a hug, not quick, not polite, but warm and grounding. We saved you a seat. Inside, chaos in the best possible way. Kid chasing a dog. Someone arguing about a movie. Richard in the kitchen insisting he didn't need help while clearly needing help. Marcus leaning against the counter, handing me a glass of wine like it was muscle memory. No one asked why I'd come. No one made a big deal out of it. Dinner happened around me, not at me. And somewhere between passing the salad and listening to Richard explain chess strategies I didn't understand, something shifted. I relaxed. I spoke without rehearsing. I laughed without checking reactions. I didn't feel the urge to apologize for existing. It scared me how good it felt. Over the next few weeks, Sundays became normal. I showed up. They made space. No one kept score. Kids started calling me Aunt Tori without asking permission. Sarah asked my opinion on paint colors. Daniel texted me memes during the week. Richard taught me chess, patiently explaining rules even though I lost every time. And Marcus was easy. Too easy. We talked in the margins of dinners, about movies, work frustrations, late-night thoughts. He listened without interrupting. He remembered things I said. He didn't try to fix me. That unsettled me more than anything. 'Cause I was used to love being transactional. But this wasn't. I didn't hear from my biological family at all. No holiday card. No follow-up call. Not even silence that felt loud. Just nothing. And for the first time I realized something unsettling. I didn't miss them the way I thought I would. I missed the idea of what I'd wanted them to be. One afternoon, Eleanor and I sat on the back porch while Richard and Marcus argued about a game inside. She watched me carefully. "Have you heard from your parents?" she asked. "No," I said. Then added, surprised, "And I haven't reached out either." She nodded. "Do you feel guilty?" I searched myself for the answer. "I keep waiting to," I admitted. "Everyone says you're supposed to forgive family no matter what." Eleanor smiled gently. "I've never believed that." I looked at her. "In my career," she continued, "I saw people destroy themselves trying to earn love from people who only offered it conditionally. Forgiveness without accountability isn't healing. It's erasure." The words stayed with me. 'Cause for the first time I wasn't shrinking. I was growing. Quick pause. If you've ever felt guilty for stepping back from family that hurt you, hit like so this reaches the right people. And tell me in the comments, did distance bring you peace or did it take time? By the time spring arrived, I was no longer visiting the Morrisons. I belonged there. And one evening, as Marcus and I sat side by side on the porch steps, watching the sun sink behind the houses, I realized something that made my heart race. This wasn't just safety. This was attachment. And I had no idea what to do with it. I thought Sunday dinners were the gift. I didn't realize they were preparing me for a choice, one that would permanently redraw the lines of who my family was and who it wasn't. It wasn't a call. It was a text. That's how my past re-entered my life, quietly, without warning, like it had a right to be there. I was standing in line at a grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the name. Victoria. I hadn't seen it on my screen in nearly 3 years. "Did you know you're getting married?" I stared at the message, my mind stalling like it had hit black ice. I wasn't engaged. I hadn't announced anything. And yet somehow they knew something. I didn't reply. I didn't block her either. I just stood there, staring at the shelves of canned soup, heart pounding as if my body recognized danger before my brain caught up. That night, Eleanor noticed immediately. "You're quiet," she said gently as she poured tea. I told her about the text. About how it felt like someone had knocked on a door I'd finally learned to stop guarding. She nodded slowly. "When people lose access to you," she said, "they don't usually apologize. They try to regain control." Her words proved prophetic faster than I expected. The next morning my phone rang. "Mom." I let it go to voicemail. Then again. And again. By the 5th call, my hands were shaking. Finally, a text came through. "Why didn't you tell us?" "We're your family." I read it twice. Then once more. 3 years of silence. No birthdays. No holidays. No acknowledgement that I existed. And now suddenly I owed them information? I set my phone down and went to work, trying to focus, but the past kept tapping at my shoulder. That evening, Marcus found me sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. "They reached out?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "What do you want to do?" That question stopped me. Not what should you do. Not what would keep the peace. Not what would make them happy. What do you want to do? "I don't want to explain myself," I said finally. "I don't want to defend my happiness." Marcus nodded. "Then don't. It shouldn't have felt revolutionary." But it did. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. I opened it without checking. That was my mistake. My mother stood in the hallway like she'd never left my life. Same posture. Same expression, disappointment wrapped in concern. "Tori," she said. "We need to talk." She stepped inside without waiting for permission. "You're getting married," she continued. "And you didn't tell me." "We haven't spoken in years," I replied calmly. I surprised myself with how steady my voice was. "That doesn't matter," she snapped. "I'm your mother." I took a breath. "You told me not to come home." "That was one Thanksgiving," she said dismissively. "It was a pattern," I replied. She looked around my apartment. Photos on the shelf, me with Eleanor, with Richard, with Marcus. Smiling. Centered. "Who are these people?" she asked sharply. "My family." Her face hardened. "I am your family." "You were," I said quietly. "You chose not to be." Her mouth opened. Closed. "I want an invitation," she said. "No." The word landed clean and final. Her eyes widened. "You don't get to punish us." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm choosing myself." She stared at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. After she left, my body shook, not from fear but from release. For the first time in my life, I hadn't folded. I hadn't explained. I hadn't apologized. I hadn't shrunk. I called Eleanor that night. "I think something changed," I told her. She smiled through the phone. "It did. You stopped negotiating your worth." Quick pause. If you've ever felt guilty for saying no to someone who hurt you, hit like so this reaches others who need to hear it. And tell me in the comments, was the hardest boundary the first one or the last? Later that night, sitting on the porch with Marcus, the air heavy with summer heat, he reached for my hand. "You know," he said softly, "whatever happens next, you're not alone." I squeezed his fingers. And for the first time, I believed it completely. I thought setting boundaries would end the story. I didn't realize it was only the beginning, because the moment I chose myself, everything else fell into place. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No explosive arguments. No long speeches. No sudden apologies. Life just continued. And that was new for me. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to decide I was too much, for the warmth around me to fade once I relaxed into it. But the weeks passed, then months, and nothing changed. Sunday dinners stayed Sunday dinners. Eleanor still called midweek just to check in. Richard still insisted on fixing things no one asked him to fix. Kids still argued over seats like it mattered. And Marcus stayed. That part unsettled me most, because I wasn't used to people staying without being asked. One evening, Marcus and I ended up alone in the kitchen while everyone else argued in the living room about a movie. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me like he was thinking something through. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. Then hesitated. "I just realized something." I waited. "You don't flinch anymore," he said. I frowned. "At what?" "At being included," he replied. "When you first started coming over, you were always bracing. Like you were waiting to be told you didn't belong." I hadn't noticed it myself. But once he said it, I felt it, the absence of that constant tension in my shoulders, the way I no longer rehearsed sentences before speaking. "I think," I said slowly, "I finally stopped expecting to be sent away." His eyes softened. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, we sat on the back porch wrapped in blankets, the air cool and quiet. "Can I ask you something?" he said. I nodded. "What happens next?" he asked. "With your parents." "With you." I looked out at the dark yard. "I don't know. For the first time, I'm not planning around them." "That scares you." "No," I said. It scares the version of me I used to be. He smiled at that. A few weeks later, Eleanor and I were planting flowers in her garden when she said something that stayed with me. You know, she said, pressing soil around a stem, people think healing is about fixing the past. It's not. I waited. It's about building a future that doesn't need the past's permission. I wiped my hands on my jeans. Is that what I'm doing? I asked. She looked at me carefully. Yes. And you're doing it well. Quick pause. If you're watching this and realizing you're allowed to build a life without waiting for approval, hit like so others can find this too. And tell me in the comments, what part of your past are you finally letting stop defining you? Spring turned into summer. And somewhere along the way, Marcus and I stopped pretending we were just friends. It wasn't sudden. There was no dramatic confession. It was quieter than that, shared glances, longer conversations, the way his hand always found mine without thinking. One evening, he asked if I wanted to go out to dinner, just us. Not a family thing. Not casual. Intentional. We went back to the same restaurant where I'd first met Eleanor. It feels symbolic, I said, sliding into the booth. That's the point, he admitted, smiling nervously. Dinner passed in a blur. I remember his hands fidgeting with his napkin, the way he took a breath like he was bracing himself. Tori, he said finally, I've been trying to figure out how to say this without messing it up. My heart started racing. I know trusting people hasn't always worked out for you, he continued. And I know you're careful. But I want you to know something. He reached across the table and took my hand. I'm not going anywhere. The words landed heavier than a love confession ever could have. Because they weren't promises about the future. They were statements about the present. I choose you, he said simply. Every day. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just felt steady. And that's when I knew. Later that night, walking home, I realized something startling. For the first time in my life, happiness didn't feel temporary. Felt allowed. I thought love was the reward at the end of healing. I didn't realize it was part of the healing itself, and that choosing each other would force a reckoning with everyone who had walked away. Marcus didn't propose right away. That surprised me. After everything we'd been through, after all the quiet certainty between us, I half expected some dramatic moment, a ring hidden in a dessert, a speech rehearsed in secret. Instead, life kept unfolding gently. And somehow that mattered more. We moved forward the way people do when they aren't trying to prove anything. We talked about the future in ordinary ways, leases, jobs, which grocery store was better, how many plants was too many for one apartment. And then one afternoon, without warning, Eleanor said something that made my heart skip. You know, she said, folding laundry beside me, people notice when you're happy. I smiled faintly. Is that good or bad? Both, she replied. Especially when they benefited from you being small. I knew what she meant before she said it. My past hadn't just noticed I'd moved on. It had started circling. Cousin followed me on social media. An aunt liked a photo from months earlier. A distant relative commented, "So glad to see you smiling again." The messages were never direct. But they were curious. And curiosity from people who had once ignored you feels a lot like entitlement. Marcus noticed too. They're testing the water, he said one night as we sat on the couch scrolling in silence. For what? I asked. For access, he replied. That word landed hard. 'Cause access had always been the problem. Weeks later, Marcus asked me to meet him after work. Just dinner, he said. Nothing fancy. But when I arrived, my stomach flipped. It was the same restaurant. Same booth. Same soft lighting that had once framed the moment everything changed. This place again? I teased. He smiled, nervous. I figured we should honor the origin story. That's when I noticed his hands. Shaking. Tori, he said, taking a breath, I don't want to build a life that's half open. I don't want you wondering if you're welcome or waiting for the other shoe to drop. He reached into his jacket pocket. I want to choose you. Publicly. Permanently. The ring was simple. Elegant. Steady like him. My chest tightened. Will you marry me? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. The word came easily, not desperate, not fearful. Certain. The restaurant erupted into applause. Someone cheered. And through the noise I saw them. Richard and Eleanor. Standing near the entrance with glasses of champagne, smiling like they'd known all along. You planned this, I accused later, laughing through tears. Eleanor kissed my cheek. Of course we did. Quick pause. If you believe love should feel safe, not earned, hit like so this reaches the people who need that reminder. And tell me in the comments, did your healthiest relationship feel calm instead of chaotic? Planning started immediately. Venues, guest lists, dates. And then came the question I'd been avoiding. The invitations. More specifically, the line that read parents of the bride. I stared at the blank document late one night while Marcus slept beside me. I couldn't write their names. Not after years of silence. Not after being erased. Not after building something real without them. Eleanor found me pacing the living room the next evening. You're stuck, she said gently. I told her everything. The guilt. Confusion. The fear of what choosing myself one last time might cost. She listened without interrupting. Then she said very carefully, there are ways to make chosen family official. I looked at her. Legally, she added. The room went still. Adult adoption, she continued softly. It's rare, but it exists. And it's meaningful. My heart pounded. You don't have to, I said quickly. I'd never ask. She took my hands. We've already chosen you, she said. We were just waiting for you to believe it was allowed. I couldn't speak. 'Cause in that moment I understood something clearly for the first time. Family wasn't about blood. It was about who showed up, consistently, quietly, without conditions. And I knew without doubt who had. I thought getting engaged was the hard part. I didn't realize the real choice was still ahead, one that would redefine my identity, my name, and force the past to confront what it had lost. I didn't say yes right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because the weight of what Eleanor had offered settled slowly, like something sacred you don't rush into. Adult adoption. A legal bond. A name. Public truth. It wasn't just paperwork. It was a declaration. That night, I lay awake beside Marcus, staring at the ceiling while the word family rearranged itself in my mind. Not the family I'd spent years trying to earn. The one that had quietly built itself around me. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked softly. I turned toward him. What if I'm doing this out of anger? He shook his head immediately. You're not. Anger pushes. This feels like choosing. That distinction mattered. The next afternoon, I met Eleanor for coffee. She didn't pressure me. Didn't sell the idea. She just answered questions calmly, clearly, the way someone does when they trust your judgment. The law can recognize what already exists, she said. But only if that recognition serves you. Not me. Not Richard. And if my parents find out? I asked. She smiled gently. Then they'll finally understand what it cost to walk away. I went home and sat with that. I thought about the Thanksgiving call. The silence afterward. The way no one had checked if I was okay. Then I thought about Sunday dinners. Eleanor's hand on my shoulder. Richard standing between me and conflict without asking. Contrast answered my question for me. I called Eleanor that evening. I'm ready, I said. She didn't cry. She just exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. Process took months. Forms, court dates, conversations that felt more ceremonial than administrative. Richard joked through the paperwork but went quiet during the hearing. When the judge asked why they wanted to adopt me, Eleanor answered without hesitation. Because she's our daughter. Not like a daughter. Not as good as a daughter. Just our daughter. I signed my name with a hand that trembled. And when it was over, the clerk handed me a copy of the paperwork with my new name printed clearly at the top. I stared at it for a long time. Felt like relief. Quick pause. If you believe chosen family is just as real as blood, hit like so this reaches others who need permission to believe that too. And tell me in the comments, have you ever built family outside of biology? The invitations went out 2 weeks later. The line I'd agonized over now felt natural. Parents of the bride, Richard and Eleanor Morrison. No footnotes. No explanations. No apologies. I should have known the silence wouldn't last. 3 weeks after the invitations arrived, my phone started buzzing. Unknown numbers. Voicemails I didn't open. Messages from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. Then, finally, a call from my mother. I didn't answer. She showed up instead. My apartment. Unannounced. Certain. You can't just erase us, she said, standing in my doorway like she still had authority there. I didn't erase you, I replied evenly. I stopped waiting. She scoffed. This is embarrassing. People are asking questions. I nodded. They should. She stared at me like she was searching for the version of me that used to fold. It wasn't there anymore. I want to come to the wedding, she said. No, I replied. The word didn't shake this time. She left angry. I closed the door calmly. And for the first time, I felt something unexpected. Peace. I thought the paperwork would be the end of it. I didn't realize the real confrontation would happen in public, with witnesses, music, and a microphone, when the truth could no longer be ignored. The morning of my wedding was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Not nervous quiet. Not the kind filled with dread. The good kind. Soft light filtered through the curtains of the bridal suite as Eleanor adjusted my veil with steady hands. She didn't rush. She didn't fuss. She treated the moment with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. You look beautiful, she said. I looked at my reflection, not just the dress but the woman wearing it. She wasn't bracing. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't waiting for permission. She was ready. Side guests were arriving. Laughter drifted in through open windows. Somewhere below, Marcus was pacing, pretending not to be nervous and failing badly. Eleanor squeezed my hands. Whatever happens today, she said softly, remember this, you are chosen. I nodded. I believed her. The ceremony itself passed like a dream. Richard walked me down the aisle, his grip firm and reassuring. Marcus looked at me like I was the only person in the room. Our vows were simple, honest, unguarded. When we were pronounced married, the applause felt like a wave lifting me instead of drowning me. The reception followed, music, food, warmth everywhere. And then the coordinator found me. Mrs. Morrison, she said quietly, there are 2 people at the entrance asking for you. I didn't need to ask who. Marcus appeared at my side instantly. Do you want me to handle it? I shook my head. No, I said calmly. I will. I took a breath, not to steady myself but to remind myself I no longer needed to be afraid. Let them in, I said. But seat them in the back. Marcus searched my face. You're sure? Yes, because this wasn't about confrontation. It was about truth. Quick pause. If you believe closure doesn't always mean reconciliation, hit like so this reaches others who need to hear that. And tell me in the comments, would you have let them in or kept the door closed? They stood out immediately. My biological parents hovered near the edge of the reception, stiff and uncertain among strangers who didn't recognize them. My mother scanned the room like she expected someone to acknowledge her. My father stayed behind her, hands folded, eyes lowered. They looked small. The MC stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" Music softened. Conversations paused. And now, as special acknowledgement, please join me in welcoming the parents of the bride. I watched my mother straighten, ready to receive what she thought was owed. Richard and Eleanor Morrison. The applause was immediate. Loud. Warm. Richard and Eleanor stood from the head table, smiling, waving, surrounded by love. Across the room, my mother's face drained of color. She grabbed my father's arm. What did he just say? My father didn't answer. He couldn't. Truth had landed, publicly, undeniably. They weren't confused because of the announcement. They were confused because it was real. My mother pushed through the crowd toward me. "What is this?" she hissed. "Who are those people?" "My parents," I said calmly. Her eyes widened. "You can't just replace us." "I didn't," I replied. "You stepped away." Her voice shook. "This is humiliating." "Then you should leave," I said softly. She stared at me, finally realizing something important. I wasn't asking. My father stepped forward then. "Tori," he said quietly. I turned. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller. His voice trembled. "I should have done better," he said. "I should have protected you." I believed him. But belief didn't erase history. "I know," I said gently. "But knowing now doesn't change then." Eleanor appeared beside me, her presence grounding. Richard stepped in front of us without hesitation. "This day isn't about the past," Richard said firmly. "It's about the family she chose and the life she built." Purity approached discreetly. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in my life, no one rushed to smooth things over. No one asked me to be quiet. No one told me to keep the peace. They were escorted out. And as the doors closed behind them, the music swelled again. Applause followed, not for the drama. For me. I thought that moment would hurt more than it did. I didn't realize the hardest part was already behind me, and that the real ending wasn't confrontation, it was peace. The wedding ended the way it should have. With laughter. With dancing. With joy that felt earned. But the real aftermath didn't begin until the next morning. I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. Messages stacked on messages. Missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Social media notifications multiplying faster than I could open them. The story had spread. Not the full story, never that, but the version people like to pass along when something challenges their beliefs. Did you really kick your parents out? Family is family no matter what. That must have been so hard for them. I deleted most of them without responding. But one message stopped me. It was from my aunt, my father's younger sister. Someone I hadn't seen in years. "Tori, I heard what happened. I just want you to know. I'm proud of you. I always knew something wasn't right." I stared at the screen for a long time. Validation doesn't always come from the people you expect. Later that afternoon, my mother posted a long message online. It talked about ungrateful children, about modern values, about family loyalty. She never used my name. She didn't have to. I blocked her without hesitation. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Marcus found me sitting on the balcony, phone face down beside me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I think I finally understand something." "What?" "That I don't owe anyone access just because they share my DNA." He smiled. "That's a powerful thing to know." Quick pause. If you've ever been pressured to accept mistreatment in the name of family, hit like so this reaches people who need that reminder. And tell me in the comments, what boundary changed your life the most? The weeks that followed were quieter. Honeymoon days blended into normal life. Grocery shopping, unpacking boxes, learning how to live with someone without losing yourself. And something unexpected happened. The guilt never came. I waited for it, the late-night spiral, the second-guessing, the ache people warned me about. Instead, I felt lighter. Like I'd set down a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. One evening, Eleanor and I sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea while Marcus and Richard argued in the next room about tools. "Do you regret it?" she asked gently. "No," I said immediately. Then softened. "I regret that it had to come to that. But I don't regret choosing myself." She nodded. That's the difference between revenge and boundaries. The messages slowed. The noise faded. And then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Careful. From my sister. I opened it slowly. She wrote about confusion. About hurt. About how our mother was just trying to keep the peace. About how I'd always made things difficult by asking questions. She said she still loved me, even if I'd decided they weren't good enough for me anymore. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not as a keepsake. As a reminder. Some people don't want understanding. They want compliance. And I was done offering that. Marcus watched me quietly. "Do you want a reply?" he asked. I shook my head. It's not my job to make them understand. And for the first time that sentence felt true. I thought the story ended when the door closed behind them. I didn't realize the real ending was still coming, not with confrontation but with something I never expected to have. Peace, purpose, and a future I'd built from scratch. Life didn't explode into happiness after the wedding. It softened into it. That surprised me. There were no fireworks, no sudden moment where everything felt perfect and complete. Instead, there was a steady rhythm, mornings that didn't start with anxiety, evenings that didn't end in overthinking, weekends that felt like rest instead of recovery. Peace, I learned, is quiet. Marcus and I settled into routines. Grocery lists stuck to the fridge. Shoes left by the door. Arguments about whose turn it was to do laundry that ended in laughter instead of silence. And Sundays. Sundays still belonged to the Morrisons. Emily, Daniel and Sarah's youngest, started insisting on sitting next to me every week. Richard pretended to complain about it while secretly slipping her extra dessert. Eleanor hummed while cooking, like happiness was something she'd always known how to carry. One afternoon, as we cleaned up after dinner, Eleanor handed me a stack of old photo albums. "I thought you might like these," she said. They were filled with decades of memories, birthdays, holidays, vacations, ordinary moments frozen in time. I flipped through them slowly. There was no version of me in these photos. And yet, I didn't feel excluded. I felt included now. "You know," Eleanor said softly, "family photos don't just record the past. They remind us who belongs in the present." That stayed with me. Quick pause. If you're realizing peace doesn't have to be loud to be real, hit like so this reaches others who need that reminder. And tell me in the comments, what does peace look like in your life right now? Months passed. Work stabilized. I was promoted. Marcus and I bought a small house just close enough to Sunday dinners and just far enough to feel like our own space. One evening, while unpacking boxes, I found my old suitcase, the one I'd packed for that Thanksgiving years ago. The one that never made the trip. I sat on the floor and laughed softly. That version of me had been so afraid of being alone, afraid of being unlovable, afraid that setting boundaries would leave me with nothing. She'd been wrong. I'd gained everything. Later that night, Marcus found me sitting on the porch steps, staring at the stars. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I was just thinking about how much effort I used to spend trying to explain myself. To people who weren't listening, he added. I nodded. I don't do that anymore. You don't have to, he said. The right people don't ask for explanations. We found out we were pregnant on a rainy Tuesday morning. I stared at the test like it might disappear if I looked away. Marcus hugged me so tightly I laughed through tears. When we told Eleanor and Richard, Eleanor cried immediately. Richard tried not to and failed. I already know what kind of mother you'll be, Eleanor said, holding my hands. Because you know what it feels like to be unseen. That hit deeper than anything else. Later, as I folded tiny clothes that felt impossibly small, I thought about the family I'd come from, the one that couldn't love me the way I needed. And for the first time, I didn't feel sadness. I felt resolve. I thought healing meant forgetting the past. I didn't realize it meant transforming it and deciding what kind of future would never repeat it. 5 years after the Thanksgiving that changed everything, I stood at the head of a very different table. The Morrison house was loud, the good kind of loud. Plates clinked. Someone argued about how to carve the turkey. A baby gurgled happily while being passed from lap to lap like a shared treasure. My daughter. She rested against my chest, warm and heavy, her tiny fingers curled around mine like she knew exactly where she belonged. 'Cause she did. I looked around the table, Richard sneaking extra pie when he thought Eleanor wasn't watching, she was, Marcus laughing with Daniel over something unimportant, kids sprawled on the floor playing a game that made no sense. This was family. Not perfect. Not quiet. Not conditional. Just real. I remembered the other Thanksgiving, the cold restaurant, the empty chair, the belief that there must be something wrong with me. I had been wrong. Nothing was wrong with me. I simply hadn't been at the right table. Eleanor caught my eye and smiled. Do you want to say something? She asked. I stood slowly, my daughter still in my arms. 5 years ago I was sitting alone in a restaurant wondering if I would ever belong anywhere. I thought love was something you earned by being quiet, agreeable, invisible. I paused, feeling Marcus's hand squeeze mine. Then a stranger named Eleanor walked up to my table and said, "No one should eat alone today." And everything changed. Richard wiped his eyes openly now. Eleanor didn't bother pretending not to cry. So here's what I've learned, I continued. Family isn't about blood. It isn't about obligation. It isn't about who claims you when it's convenient. Family is about who shows up when you're not at your best. Who makes space without asking you to shrink. Who chooses you again and again without conditions. I raised my glass. To family. Kind we build. Kind that chooses us back. To family, everyone echoed. My daughter let out a soft, happy sound and everyone laughed. Later that evening, Marcus and I sat on the porch, bundled in blankets, watching the lights glow through the windows behind us. Do you ever think about them? He asked gently. I knew who he meant. Sometimes, I admitted. But not with sadness anymore. What do you feel? I thought about it. Gratitude. For the clarity. For the boundaries. For the life I built once I stopped waiting for permission. I feel free, I said. Kissed my forehead. Inside, Eleanor rocked my daughter gently, humming a tune she'd probably hummed to generations before, and would now hum to mine. I watched them through the window and felt something settle permanently in my chest. Home. If you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel like you were too much for asking to be treated fairly, if you've been blamed for causing drama when you were really just telling the truth, if you've been told family comes first, even when family hurts you, I want you to hear this. You are not the problem. You never were. You deserve a seat at the table. And if the one you were born into won't make room, you are allowed to build your own. Before you go, if this story meant something to you, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It helps more people who need these stories find them. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to choose yourself, even when it meant walking away from family? Thank you for staying until the end. You deserve to be chosen.